Muy bienvenidos, un gusto estar en otro encuentro de los momentos de Q&A, como se suele decir en inglés, en realidad preguntas y respuestas, o encuentros con los realizadores que estamos celebrando como aquellos que nos parecen importantes dentro del cine contemporáneo. Son apuestas algunas, otras confirmaciones. El caso de Maya Connors es una cineasta, como pueden observar, muy joven. Ha trabajado hasta el día de la fecha en películas de corta duración, son cortometrajes que nunca pasan los 20 minutos. Hay una película nueva, misteriosamente sucede en Gesell, en Villa Gesell, pero eso será para el futuro del Doc Buenos Aires, otros festivales argentinos, y antes habrá de estrenarse, quizás con suerte, en Berlinale o en algún otro festival. Vamos a pasar entonces al inglés, le damos la bienvenida a Maya y gracias a toda la audiencia por estar ahí. Thank you so much, my dear Maya. I just was introducing you. At this moment, you are in Hamburg, in Germany. I am in Córdoba, Argentina. And the people who will be watching this, we don't know where are they from, you know, but maybe Argentinians, maybe from Chile, maybe from Uruguay. We'll see. It's a privilege and a pleasure to come once again with your films, in this case for Buenos Aires Doc Film Festival. And I'd like to start talking about your films. We are just showing 4 films of yours. And before talking specifically about them, I would like to, if you can tell us a little bit your background as a filmmaker. You are a filmmaker from Hamburg. You have gone through the University of Hamburg. How is your background?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very glad to be able to show these 4 films here. And yeah, I studied at the art school in Hamburg, and I graduated in, let me think, 2015. So it's been a few years. Yeah, and I studied for a pretty long time here, as it's open. You don't have a specific time in which you have to finish studies here. So I was here for 8 years at the university. And actually that is the art school is actually the place where I really started making the films that I'm making now. And when I started studying, I was 22, and I hadn't done much before, and I had a really different idea of what I wanted to do when I got to the art school, and was really lucky, I guess, that the art school took me, because I actually thought I was going to do documentaries for TV, and because I had done internships in that area before, and didn't really know that much about experimental film and video art until then. So yeah, but
talking about this, maybe we can leave the background and go to the foreground. When I am watching your films, which I have been following since I almost met you, I have the feeling that there is a kind of, yes, they're experimental in certain ways, and there are certain patterns which they repeat themselves, which is a kind of connection between science open topics. It's not so clear, but something connected with a scientist curiosity or something like that, a scientific curiosity, personal issues, personal topics, and then there is a kind of, it's not fiction, but it's not completely documentary. It's not a hybrid. It's a kind of essay way of coping with what you could do in cinema. So can you explain us a little bit about this kind of movement between, if I am correct, between personal issues, scientific curiosity, and that kind of science and fiction. It reminds me Jean Pailivet box set of films. Science is fiction. But please tell me.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of my films, I had a kind of personal starting out point. And as a big part of my films is the editing process, or the main part, I would say, because that is really where the films become the films. And I don't really, when I plan a film, I have a subject, but I don't really know what it's going to look like. So it's a lot of long, hard editing work.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a long time for short films. It's about 2 years, I would say, for a short film. And as I edit, I often take out a lot of the ideas I had before, like the personal. Then there's also, and at the same time, I also read a lot during this time, different things. Also scientific texts, for example, if it concerns that topic. I don't know if can explain that by an example in the films. In A Nice Place to Leave, the starting point is like a family story, family history found on the internet, and a lot of things that were scanned, and also old family photographs I found. And then I find certain points in the family history that connect to other archive footage I find. And then in the image I try to connect it, and try to, afterwards I take out everything that is like an obvious reference to my own family, at least in the image. And the text, that's still there in that film, but for example, I took out all the actual photographs of my family in the film. And that's, I think,
which at the beginning you thought to include it,
yeah, I had this idea, but in the end, it's also that I'm interested in a kind of fiction also that goes away from me talking about my family, for example. I mean, I think this is a film that's the most about, like, or the only one that's really about family history. And then also in the editing process, it becomes, because I take away the sound, or I try to make it a bit stranger or something. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
That for me, the film becomes a kind of fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, there is always in your films a kind of process of the familiarization of what is being shown, and of course, one of the procedures is to work on sound in order to do that. There is something which is very interesting from a point of view of like someone like me who is not German. You're a German filmmaker, but most of your film, it says one that we are showing, which is Hypnos. Most of your films are spoken in English. That is a very strange election. Of course, there is something connected with your background because your mother, it's American, or your father, I can't remember.
My father.
So, but even though you could have chosen to do your film in German, can you tell us a little bit that kind of linguistic curiosity?
Well, I grew up speaking English and German, so bilingually. And the first few years of my life, I lived in Korea, in South Korea, with my parents. And there, I think we mostly also spoke English. And actually, I think English is the language in which I learned to read first. So, and I still mostly read in English. I don't know. somehow I feel more comfortable in it, even though I'm speaking. I grew up in Germany. Speaking, I'm probably more German. I don't know, but also that was something that in the Owls Have Grown As Big As a Half Moon, that was a big part of making the film, especially the text, was also this act of translating that text of the voiceover. That was those were notes I wrote on a trip to Korea, looking for the memories from the time when I lived there as a child. And I wrote them in German and in English. And then when I wrote the voiceover text, or that condensed it out of the notes, I translated it several times from German to English, and it just became its own text through translating. And there, I think that was something that's I was always very interested in, because I also remember that which I talk about in that film, is that when we came back to Germany when I was 3.5, something that I didn't speak for a few months because it was just such a big change, and then being back in Germany, and that also had to do with language, I think. And so yeah, that's why I always try to do films in German too, but I haven't been able to do so.
I was not only surprised, I feel I like that particular confession you have done, that you might take about 2 years editing a film, which finally it's no more than 20 minutes. The only person that I know who works in such a kind of, systematic and long period of time working on a film is Mr. Artavas Peleshan. That for me is one of the most important filmmakers ever. How could it be that you are working for 2 years in films which takes less than 30 minutes? What are you looking for, and how is that process? I'm a little bit curious.
Well, it has a lot to do with that the film takes shape during the editing process, that I have to try out a lot of things, and that I want to be sure of these things. And I feel it's a process of condensing. So, and that's on 3 levels, I think: the image, the sound itself, and then the text mostly.
How do you write the composition of the film? I mean, I'm not talking about the script. What kind of process do you think implies in terms of association? Because your films has a kind of association flow, that one image brings another, and so you have an idea. Take, for instance, Diary of an Organism. You just the title itself, it takes something about how to think about the boundaries, because if there is an organism, there is a limit between one and the others, and there would be a connection between organisms, just to put it in theoretically. And then you have that an idea, and then how is the process of bringing up the film?
It's interesting with this film. I think it's the film which is for me the most footage film of my films, where I really like playing with found footage, even though a lot of the found footage is my own footage from 10 years ago. Sorry, here's something on the screen that I have to put away.
Not me.
I know, okay. No. And I don't know, it's maybe an image or a sound, which is the starting point. I had always in this film, I had always had images of these women in Korea that I filmed for The Owls Have Grown As Big As a Half Moon, who were collecting something. And then I had on the phone filmed images of my daughter collecting things at the beach, or like a child collecting things. And also, it was a little bit coincidence at the beginning, I would say, because I had found this found footage on the internet that I was actually researching for a fiction film where I was supposed to do a footage sequence. And in one of those sequences, there's a computer voice reading lines from Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there I got interested in the figure of Ophelia from Hamlet, which is an image which I think also, like Hamlet is an image that you know about without having read it, mostly, because there's so many films and use it. Yeah,
by
it's
repeated
like a used image. And I felt like I had all these different moments of things from archives, like for me were also different kinds of organisms, as the women collecting, then the children collecting, then I have a fictional character from a book. And then one other thing was the Golden Record archive that was sent into space on the Voyager, which is like also an archive of mankind and for possible aliens in the future.
But how do you get to the idea? Because that description is necessary, of course, but it's something. Let me rephrase my question, because I'm interested in understanding how it works. At the very beginning, you have a kind of vision, intuition, or like the name of the film, Diary of an Organism. Then you start collecting. Then you see the coincidences and the flow association that you can put it together, and then you start working on that, and the film is ready. It's like that.
Yes, but in this film, it was actually, this happened more on the side than the other films, that I started connecting the things. And the other films were more like, okay, I have an idea and I will go somewhere and I will film. So maybe the Diary of an Organism is a bit different in that way. And the other films was also, maybe if you plan on if you need funding beforehand, and so I planned, like Korea, I planned on going there and just filming and seeing what would happen. And also with Hypnos in unserem Dunkel, that was a plan to go to the south of France and film there this poetry. Or and a nice place to leave was the idea to film in Hamburg, about the city where my father grew up in, Paterson, New Jersey, without having been there. So those were films where I had an idea of the subject beforehand, but Diary of an Organism kind of happened in while working on it.
But the whole, all films has a kind of continuity. Me as someone watching your films, I could see the kind of poetics of cinema behind it, which I like to say something about it and ask something about it. But before that, let's go back now to Hypnos, because it's the only one who it's not in German, it's not in English. It's a French, one of the greatest poet, who is René Char, someone who was extremely loved by Michel Foucault. But it's in the translation done by Mr. Paul Celan, and the film is in German, finally. And the first one, but it's co-directed on one hand.
Yeah.
Still, I see it's a film of yours, but there's some difference there, in certain ways. It's more like the text is the text, the poetry is the poetry. You go towards the paper, like in a kind of movement, then you go to special places, and there is a kind of dialectics between what you see and what you listen to. That's the whole idea, I think. And then, can you tell me a little bit about that film? That it was hidden, it hasn't been shown in any time, right?
Yeah, it was never shown, and that's why I'm so happy to be able to show it here,
Yes, I am
because I
happy
really like
also.
it, this film, and it's one of the I think I would say, well, like my first real film,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, or where I started working in a way how I work now, even though it's different. And in a way, things that are similar to the other works or that I already did there was that the interest in translation, I would say, because working with the German text,
Mm-hmm.
we work with a German text with a translation, which is of course a great translation by
Of course.
Porcelain. And because we, in a way, we could, even though we could speak a little bit of French, we could understand the German text better. And we also thought it was interesting because we then looked for our own translation in the images and the landscape. We walked through the landscape and tried to find a translation for these images or the mood in these images. So that's something that I think connects to what I do today. And in a way, I think it's also maybe less playful.
And
Try
more
to say,
political
yeah.
in certain ways.
But in a way, I always think that I would like to go back to making films like this one, because for me it was I like that it's so strict and simple. It has this landscape and these images, and
Yeah, I
yeah, but
understand.
I haven't been able
No,
to go.
for me, who I have wrote about all your films, it's a big challenge when I have to write about your films because it's not easy. There are films which are so pleasurable to watch, but there are films which are very difficult to understand in certain ways.
Mhm,
It's not because they are cryptic, because they are ellipticals.
mhm,
There are a lot of elliptical issues and enigmatic issues behind it. Easily you could understand the flavor of it. It's about this, it's about that. But then how to translate that on a text?
mhm.
That for me is always a challenge to write about Maya Connor's films. Talking about you, in what kind of tradition do you see yourself as a filmmaker?
Uh, it's different, I would say. I mean, of course, like essay film, and because that's also something that we saw a lot at the art school,
Mm-hmm.
and experimental film, or the like connecting points between essay film and experimental film, like films by Jonas Mekas,
Mm-hmm.
for example, in the way of filming and editing,
Mm-hmm.
or Van der Kolken, also in a way, which I think is because it has this rhythm in the editing that is just something that I very much like to watch. But at the same time, I'm also really I often have, when I watch a film, there are certain images that first stay for me that are very strong. It might be some simple image, and that's often also from fiction films that I feel like in one image it tells so much of a story. And uh, yeah, so I wouldn't say it's just I see
Mm-hmm.
myself just in one
Mm-hmm.
tradition.
Okay, no, of course, you,
Mhm.
because again, they're a little bit along among the German filmmakers of your generations. I don't see many people working on the same kind of path, and there are few maybe in the past, but not on the in the present.
Mm.
And it's interesting to see that. Because your films are only four, and the whole bunch together, they're not more than 40 minutes. I think it's enough to be talking about the films. Otherwise, that would be longer than the films altogether, and it
Okay.
shouldn't be like
But
that. Okay. And thank you so much, Maya, for your generosity, for giving us the possibility to show the films. You have been so generous with the festival. I have to say the audience openly. And, um, and I'm really looking forward to watching the next one, which takes place in Argentina, half, most of the part in Villa Gesell.
yeah,
So, in fact, I saw a cut, but sooner or later the final film will be there, and I hope to be able to show it in Argentina in all the festivals that I am, or in other festivals that I can seduce the programmers and directors to include it, because I think it would be a fantastic film. Thank you so much, and
thank you.
say hello to all my hamburgers fellows friends. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.